Hello, YTPC. Ethan, Parsimonious Piper here. Some days it feels like my voice is almost back, and this is one of them. Hey, in a 3-star Pipe by Lee apple, got another bowl of that Gatlinburg or Cumberland. Nice mild crossover English. Today we have first of the year installment, Morsels for Mental Manducation. But first, let me share a Christmas present that I got. Thought you guys might appreciate that. Back before Christmas, Doug, Michigan Piper, whose link will be below, assuming I remember, posed a question, a good question. He asked, how do I justify my lifestyle when I know that there are people around the world who are abused, starving, mistreated? It's a good question. It's one that does require introspection. For those of us who are Christians, it's one that also requires an examination of what God tells us in Scripture. This is not going to be preachy. He went on to specifically say, how do I justify buying that next pipe that I don't really need, or that next tin or bag of tobacco that I won't smoke for 6 months or a year? From a biblical perspective, let me turn this around just a little bit. Because one of the things that we're called to do is to be good stewards of what God's given us. And I will not pretend to be preaching at you and telling you that I am or have ever been a perfect steward of the blessings of God in my life. I'm going to talk a little bit about shoulds, a little bit about experience, and maybe how to get closer to the shoulds. We're called to be good stewards, which means to manage well the things that God has given us. There are parables in the New Testament about using the things that you've been given and investing them wisely. In that context, there is no penalty for investing wisely and having some monetary gain in that regard. It's a blessing, and in fact, you're expected to do it, to increase what you've been given. So there's that aspect of it. In the Old Testament, far more than in the New, in the Old Testament, one of the most obvious ways that God showed blessing and favor upon those who were faithful was with material wealth. We see this in stories throughout the Old Testament. So wealth in and of itself may be a gift from God. May not be, but it may be. Now, the other side of that, and some of these are specific to individuals. For example, when Jesus is asked by the rich young ruler, what do I have to do? And Jesus says, well, you got to sell everything and follow me. That wasn't a general prescription for everyone. That was Jesus looking into this young man's heart and realizing that his wealth is what he worshiped. And that he was going to have to knock that wealth down out of the first position in order to put God there. Elsewhere in the New Testament, in the epistles, is the famous and often misquoted scripture that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's not the root of all evil, it's the root of all kinds of evil. And putting that first causes all kinds of dysfunction in your life. So, to circle back now to the question, how do I justify a life of plenty when there are so many in the world hurting? Well, there are a few different aspects to this. One is to make sure that you are not holding on to your stuff too tightly, to make sure that I, right here, am not holding on to my stuff too tightly. That's a heart issue, most definitely. It comes out in practical ways, though. And there we get this, this where what we should do, which is clearly we should help people around us with what we can do. Now, we are definitely both directly and by example throughout the Old and New Testaments instructed to help the people around us. We are not necessarily instructed to help people on the other side of the world, but that may be a matter of simply omission, not that we are not supposed to do that. But as the saying goes, and it is not a scriptural saying, but charity does start at home. Love begins at home. It begins with those you are around. Have you taken care of your family? Have I made sure that the people that I'm in contact with in my neighborhood are okay? In the New Testament, Christians in particular are called not to feed the world, but to take care of their own. We're told that those who are not believers will know that we are believers by what? By our love for each other. By how we take care of each other. We should be doing that within the church. In particular, we should be taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. And here we come into another bit of scripture. What about those who can but won't? Well, you can find it for yourself. Do a little digging. Paul says those who don't work don't eat. That may sound harsh, but freeloaders are not welcome. This is really good. Now, in terms of practicality, what can you do? Well, truth is that Elon Musk could give all of his wealth to charity and it would not change the world. Sounds a little harsh, doesn't it? But it's true. We have poured billions of dollars in relief into third world countries. America has. We have poured billions of dollars into relief, and it has not stopped starvation. It has not stopped corruption. It has not stopped slavery. Just throwing money at the problem is not going to solve it. Now, that's not an excuse to do nothing, but it is an indication that the solution is a lot more complicated than just give, and throw more resources at the problem, and it will go away. It's a more complicated issue than that. So what can you do practically? Well, I can tell you two things from my own experience, and neither one of these is a brag or a humble brag. They are about God's blessing. A number of years ago, my wife and I decided that it was time to begin putting our money where our mouth was. We were not tithing, for those of you who are not familiar with the biblical concept of tithing. That is to give 10% of your income to, well, originally to bring it into the temple in the Old Testament. And that was used at the time for both the upkeep of the temple and what was necessary for government. We're paying far more than 10% right now, but we made the decision that was something that we needed to do. What we didn't do, we didn't just take that leap of faith and begin tithing right up front. We started out the first month by giving 1%, next month by giving 2%. And so on. Until eventually we reached the point where we were giving 10% of our income. The month after we hit 10%, my employer gave me the largest percentage increase in pay that I had up to that point or since ever received. Want to guess how much it was? It's 10%. Now that is not something that everybody's going to experience. You may not believe it yourself, and it's the truth. That's not a brag on me. That's a brag on God. God takes care of us. I don't pretend to have been 100% faithful since then. It's a good thing that God's grace covers my flaws. But you can do that. You can build up to giving 10% if you're not doing that already. I'm at a place in my life right now where I am blessed to be able to give more, and I try to consistently. That's not on me. That's on Him. I can't seem to outgive Him. It's odd how it works that way. Now, the second practical thing, in addition to just building up slowly what you give, is who do you give to? Well, that's tricky too. If you are a believer, you should be a member of a local church. We're told not to abandon the gathering. And at least some of your tithes should be going there to help support your local congregation. What other places can you put your money wisely? And if you're not a believer and you're not a member of a church, where can you go? Well, here in the U.S. at least, there are organizations that evaluate charities based on their tax returns, and they give charities ratings that are an indication of what is the ratio of dollars in to dollars spent on the intended recipients versus dollars that are taken out in overhead and office expenses and salaries, etc. Find an organization in your area that does that. Find some of those charities that you can support that do use most of their funds as they're advertised and intended. I do that. I support a couple of local charities that are ranked very high in that regard, and that also have a very high success rate in getting people off the street, out of poverty, off of substance abuse. And to me, that's very important, because that helps one person at a time. That does, in fact, change somebody's world. I may not be able to change the world for everyone, but I can help change the world for a few. So can you. Find those charities that do something that you think is important, whether it's educating people, whether it's helping people clean up, find jobs, whatever it is that you think is important, do that. And you won't have any feelings of guilt about enjoying the blessings that God gives you if you're not holding on to them too tightly and you're willing to share them with other people to help them also experience the blessings of God. Well, Doug, I hope that answers your question. I know that went a lot longer than I usually go, partly because I'm pausing a lot to make sure that I'm thinking and saying what I intend to say. But in short, I don't think you have to justify it. The expenditures that we make, as my dogs go crazy, help somebody's business stay afloat. The super wealthy, when they buy a yacht, who do you think builds that yacht? You know, they're keeping people in business. So I don't think you do. I don't think you have to justify living a life of relative ease compared to the rest of the world, knowing that if you gave everything up, it wouldn't change a thing. It would not. Do what you can, not what you're guilted into. And with that, folks, light something you like. We'll talk about this blend a little bit more tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon.